Hello chess friends! In my last video I suggested that perhaps Magnus Carlsen's brain is not of human origin, just based on the way he's been going through these top GMs like it's nothing, getting winning positions after like 10 moves and then just playing like a computer for the whole game. But after his recent performance in these final rounds of the Julius Baer Generation Cup, where he's been facing Erigaisi, I may have to revise that position to state that either A, his brain is in fact of human origin, or B, maybe he's just getting bored and toying with his opponents. I'll let you draw your own conclusions after we look at the critical positions together. Okay, first position I want to look at, Carlsen's playing white, and here he has the opportunity to play what to me seems like an obvious best move, after consulting with Stockfish of course, A4. The knight has to move, then we put a rook to the B file, and we're going to play B4, open up the file, and we have a winning attack. Instead, Carlsen plays F4, which is not a bad move, but it does allow A4. And now you're not going to play A4 and that knight's secure there, and white doesn't really have a winning attack anymore. Okay, but the game goes on, and eventually Carlsen again develops a winning initiative at this point. And here Carlsen has a few good options to maintain his winning initiative. Knight F3 is a good move. G5 is a good move apparently to discourage the idea of knight takes E5 followed by F6. That could be a good way for black to get some play. But instead Carlsen goes for this bishop H4 move, which looks pretty strong on the surface. You know, you're attacking the sole defender of this knight on D7, so if that rook moves, you know, you're just winning a piece. But black has a good response. What would you play here as black? Erigaisi fails to see the best move, which actually would have shifted the evaluation into black's favor, G5. Okay, what does this do? Doesn't it just lose a pawn? F takes G5? Well, no, because then you get the knight here, takes. That's a nice transformation. If you take with the bishop, now you have the problem of F6 with the fork. Bishop can drop back, and then you get the knight. And here, white doesn't even want to take the rook. You want to take on E5. And you've gotten 2 pawns for your piece, and this is your best chance. Black can move that rook out of the way, and then we'll play E3. And black is better, but there's hope for white. If you take on D8, then there's E takes F4. You don't even capture the bishop. You grab that pawn, and then if the bishop tries to get away, you got this hitting the queen, and there's this knight takes a E2 thing. So all those lines favored black. Erigaisi missed that. He played F6, which was the second best move. Okay, knight to F3 from Carlsen, and we have some more moves, and Carlsen ends up developing a strong attack again. After Erigaisi plays this knight to F8 move, which I'm not entirely sure what it does. I guess maybe getting out of the way of this rook's view of the center, maybe E5 is a plan or something. Stockfish says the best chance was B6, and then Carlsen should do this and open up the file and then play E5. That's black's best way to go. But instead, knight F8, E3. So what ends up happening is Carlsen ends up playing G5, trades off the pawns, trades off the bishops, opens up the G file, and you can kind of see where this is going. Look at this pawn. This is a sacrifice waiting to happen. And it does happen. Spoiler alert. Okay, so getting ready to double the rooks. Carlsen's going after the black king here. And right here, Carlsen could have already played this bishop takes G6 sacrifice. Yeah, takes, queen takes. Okay, so black's best defense is maybe king to H8 so that you can play knight F5. That knight was pinned. You want to play knight F5 in the response to knight G5. So let's say knight G5 is played, now you just go knight F5, and you're covering a lot of these key squares around the black king there. So you're going to be okay. Black's actually better here. So white doesn't play G5 in that case. You go queen to H6 check, and then you block with the knight. And then this is the best play from both sides apparently. You put the knight here, looking to come into G6 with a devastating effect. So you have to go rook F6 and sack the exchange. What ends up happening is you have the 2 knights for the rook as black, but white has 2 extra pawns, and these knights are just completely paralyzed due to all the threats to the black king, and white is totally winning here. That was the best way to go for black, apparently. Best defense to white's best line. Carlsen did not play the best line, instead he doubled rooks, and this gives black the opportunity to defend with knight F to E8. It's not what Erigaisi played. He played queen to C7, which makes things easier for Carlsen. Knight f to e8 is a little more resilient. Now, if you take on g6, it's not really working because after this rook f6 is played, supported by that knight, driving the queen back. And now white's attack is not so strong now that the queen has to go back here. You wanted that queen around here to be able to hit more squares, and I guess black couldn't survive that possibly. Of course, here you don't take. You go knight g5 instead, and you're still winning. But Erigaisi plays queen c7. Makes sense. He wants to get as many pieces around his king as he can because he knows what's coming. And here Carlsen does have bishop takes g6. It's a good move. Takes. Queen takes because here there's no rook f6. So the queen just gets to hang out there for a minute. Now the threat here is, if white was to have just some free moves, you'd have knight g5 followed by queen h6, and then this kind of a thing, drawing the rook away from the defense, and then this kind of a thing, and black's toast. So, knight f to e8 does not work here anymore because knight g5, rook f6, it's too late. We have queen h7 because the knight got to g5, and then this runs into checkmate, so that should be noted. Maybe the best defense here is king h8, and again, it's similar to what we saw before with knight h7, knight e5, and then you go here, here, takes, that again. The best defense was not played by Erigaisi. He was knight e4. A very human response. He's anticipating knight g5, and he says, I just want to take that knight out. But Carlsen's still winning after allowing the knight to be captured. Even though he only has 2 rooks and a queen to attack, it is more than sufficient. Now the threat here is going to be rook h5 followed by queen here, here, this kind of a thing. So Erigaisi needs to stop that, and he chooses to do so with rook to f5. So now Carlsen makes the only winning move. You don't want to trade rooks, you got to get your rook back, but you also want to preserve the possibility of moving the rook to this file. So that was the best move. These 2 moves would not have accomplished that. So now rook e to f7. I think the thinking here is that the king wants to be able to escape to e7. Black's best hope is that white will go for this rook h4 idea. And this line with queen h7 check, driving the king to e7, and then taking on g7, and then black can take here, and then you have to do this in-between move, rook takes f7 check, after the rook captures and you capture the queen, and white will win with the 2 extra pawns, which, everything is losing for black now, but that is the way to prolong the misery. But Carlsen doesn't go for that line. He goes for queen takes e6, which is immediately decisive, and I believe this is where Erigaisi resigns, because how are you going to save this rook? What's coming, let's say you go like this to unpin this rook. This rook was pinned for the moment. You just got takes, queen f5 check, and this again. You end up with the 2 extra pawns. That would force a trade of queens. It'd be over. You don't really have any move to deal with that threat. I mean, if you try to move the rook like this, you go takes, and that rook couldn't even take because it was pinned. So you had to undo this pin here, or else you're just losing the knight. And then this runs into checkmate, actually, here, here, here. So, very nice performance by Carlsen, though not perfect. Erigaisi was given some chances, which he did not make full use of. So on to the next game. Okay, I've saved the best for last. This next position comes from a game where Erigaisi has the white pieces. Magnus Carlsen is playing black. And we get to this position where Erigaisi has the chance to win the exchange with bishop takes e3, which he does. After queen takes e3 check, he moves his king to f1. Carlsen is in a lot of danger here, but he finds the only winning move. What should black play here? Take a minute and look at it. See if you can spot black's only winning move. Everything else loses. Carlsen finds the correct move, moving this knight to d5. Okay, so before I explain that move, let's look at some alternatives and see what is wrong with him. So you might have thought knight g4. It threatens checkmate in 2 different ways. It threatens queen to f2 mate, and if white defends against that, we got knight takes h2. That's checkmate also. So that move looks pretty good, but white has a response that wins. Can you see what white's best move is at this point? Knight to c6 check will force mate. B takes c6, Rook d8, king b7, queen a6, that is mate. So you have to do something about that threat. Let's say you try bishop takes d4. We can take with the rook. This is why the king was moved to f1, by the way. If the king had been on h1, you couldn't take with the rook because of queen to e1 check. So now the threat is still alive to come in here. And so you don't have time for knight g4. So you really need to block this file. And another point to this move, knight to d5, is that it opens up this f4 square for a check. Because there is a line, a defensive try here, by white if you were to go rook to e1. This could be very bad. If we didn't have this check here, then the rook coming in here, it will lead to checkmate. But here, black has queen to f4 check. If the king moves, we got takes, queen d4 check, and then we pick up the bishop on c4 with a winning position. If you were to try putting the knight in the way, then I believe we just grab the bishop like this, winning that way. And that also comes with an even more devastating check because you have to put the rook in the way, and then we got stuff like this, and yeah, this is going to be over very fast. So Carlsen found the only winning move. He needed to block this file, and he also needed to have this f4 square for a check. So what Erigaisi played was this bishop takes d5 move, eliminating the knight, but after knight g4, he had to resign, because what are you doing about the checkmate? You can try to defend with queen c2, but again, there's this beautiful knight takes h2, checkmate. So that was a remarkable tactical resource spotted by Carlsen. Now there's a few defensive tries after Carlsen plays this knight d5 move that I should probably mention. We want to look for ways that we can prevent knight to g4, so the most obvious try is h3. This fails to knight h5 because now we're coming into g3 and we're going to checkmate that way, and there's no good way for white to prevent that. You got to just start giving up your queen, things like that. So that's not working. If you go after the black queen with rook d3, then there's queen c1 check. If you move the king, you get into big trouble after something like knight to f4 check, and we're going to end up taking on d3. But equally bad is rook to d1, and you got the knight e3 fork that way. So that's not going to work. The most interesting attempt at holding the position is this bishop to e2 move. And now black has only one move that is completely crushing, head and shoulders above all the rest of the moves. If you can spot this move, I would suggest that you enter some chess tournaments and start trying to win some money, if you haven't already, because I don't think there's a lot of players that would spot this move. It doesn't seem obvious to me. See if you can find it. g4 is the crushing move, just so we can get to g3 and get rid of this pawn, because once this pawn is gone, we're going to land a knight on g3 with checkmate. And it seems kind of slow, but white doesn't really have any good response. Let's say you play something like queen c2. We got g3. Now, you have to do something because the threat is, like say you play bishop d3 or something, we're going to take here and we're going to get a queen. You can't stop it. But once you take the pawn, then knight e4, coming into g3, and now you have to just sack your queen again, or you're going to get mated with knight takes g3. So let's say you try instead, maybe you want to try rook d3 again, attacking the queen, queen c1 check, the queen goes in the way, we go back to f4 check, king moves, and then we got knight takes c3, hitting the queen, you move the queen, we got here, check, here, and bishop takes d4 check, and then if the king moves, we're going to go here, and it's just crushing. I guess you have to take here, and then there's this stuff. I don't know. There's so many variations here. It's crazy. I'm wondering how much of this Carlsen actually saw. If you try rook takes c3 here, it's just bishop d4 check, winning the rook. Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of variations to look through after this bishop to e2 move. And that's just a small sample. So, an incredibly brilliant move by Carlsen, and only move, this knight to d5 move. So I hope you enjoyed that. Consider subscribing to the channel for more videos similar to this one coming soon.